Okay guys, this is a review of 7.1. I'm going to change the order of things so maybe it will help you. But if you are okay with what we did with 7.1 earlier, just stop this video and continue on where you are. Or watch this as a review. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is write down my X and Y axis. Okay, that's where to start the graph. Now, some of you question, how do you know where to put it? Well, I want my graph around here, so I'm putting this over on the edge. I also know that my amplitude is going to be 3 because of that number up front, and I'm going down 1, so I'm going to need probably 4 at the bottom. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll give myself some space, so maybe I'll put it right here. Okay, so this is my X and Y axis. Next, what I want you to do is remember what's the first thing we found. We found midline. And the midline comes from what's added or subtracted at the very end. So in this case, our midline is -1. What I'm now going to do is actually put the midline on my graph. So I'm using a different color so I don't confuse that with the X and Y axis. Okay, so it's at -1. Then we're going to do our amplitude, which is our height above and below the midline. So our amplitude is what's in front, so in this case it's 3. I'm also going to graph that off the bat. So from the midline, 1, 2, 3. So that's my high, and then my low. 1, 2, 3. So I know my coordinates will always be on these blue points. Okay. The next thing I had you found was your period. Your period for sine and cosine will always be 2 pi over b. Okay. B is the value in front of x. So in this case, it's going to be 2 pi over 2. Reduce that down, we get pi. Okay, so what does that mean? If you remember, when we graph, we're going to graph the first point, 4 extra points. So I'm going to split that up into every 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4. The period is that last tick mark. So this is at pi. What we then can do is we need to divide everything in half. Well, pi divided by half is pi over 2. That's that middle. Well, what's the middle here? What's in between 0 and 0.5 is a quarter. So pi over 4. Well, watch, a quarter, a half. This should be 75 cents or 3 pi over 4. And I'm okay with you keeping it in decimals, but that pi needs to be there. Alright, now we need to actually graph our function. So this is the function of sine. Sine will always start at the midline. So on my y-axis, I'm going to start at the midline. Remember, I'm only putting points on the blue lines. And then it's positive, so my positive means I'm going to go up. If I had a negative, I would go down. So I'm going to go up to that next tick mark, and it's going to be at the very high end. Now we can't go up any further, so we're going to go back to to the midline, all the way down, back to the midline. Many of you were graphing this as straight lines, but the truth is, guys, it's a curve. And we're done. We're going to do one more with cosine, but again, maybe this different order will help you with your homework better. Okay, so let me do our x and y axis. So this is my y. See, I'm starting above at 3 and going up 1 from it, so probably 4. So let's do 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's put the x-axis right here. Okay. Now, remember the first thing we talked about was our midline. So our midline is what's added or subtracted at the end. So it's 3. I'm going to have you graph that. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now our amplitude is what's in front. Our amplitude is 1. If you put down -1, I'm okay with it, but think of height as always positive. So I'm going to graph that amplitude now. So it's 1 above the midline and 1 below the midline. We then have our period. 2 pi over b, which in this case is 1/2. I know sometimes I ask you guys to do this math in your head or on paper, but really, you guys, you could grab a calculator right now and say 2 divided by 1/2. Okay, don't include the pi. And we get 4. So this is 4 pi. Do you remember what that means? It means that at my 4th tick mark, that's what the period is. So 4 pi. Okay, let's divide that in half to get this tick mark, which is 2 pi. Well, what's between 0 and 2 pi? 1 pi. What's between 2 pi and 4 pi? 3 pi. Alright. Cosine starts where? Cosine usually starts at the top. Should be right here. But since it's negative, we're going to actually reflect it. So, instead of starting at the top, we're going to start at the bottom. So remember, points are only on the blue line. The next tick mark here at pi would be at the midline. Then the top, go back down. Oops, that was a wrong point. So not this point, guys. Your ending will always be on the same spot as your beginning. Okay? So if you didn't start and end in the same place, something's wrong. And again, don't make an upside down V here, guys. Kind of make it curvy. Alright, I'm hoping that clears some things up. Help each other out and do your homework.